When a billionaire shows up at your door in the middle of a blizzard, demanding payment for a debt you thought was buried 20 years ago, you know your life is about to implode. That's exactly what happened to Ethan Cole, a single dad who thought he'd escaped his past. But Arya Voss didn't come to reminisce, she came to collect. And what she wanted would tear apart everything he'd built. If you want to see how far desperation can push two people who once had everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The doorbell shouldn't have rung at all. Not at 7:30 on a Tuesday night. Not in the middle of a blizzard that had already dumped 8 inches on their small Vermont town. Not when the wind was howling hard enough to rattle the windows and make the power lines sway like jump ropes. Ethan Cole looked up from the kitchen sink, hands still wet, a half-washed plate dripping soap onto the counter. Upstairs, he could hear Mia moving around in her room, probably still pretending to do homework while scrolling through her phone. The doorbell rang again. Sharp. Insistent. He dried his hands on a dish towel that had seen better days, walked through the living room, past the worn couch, past the bookshelf stuffed with Mia's old picture books and his collection of spy novels he never had time to read, and stopped at the front door. Through the frosted glass panel, he could make out a figure, tall, still, not huddled against the cold like a normal person would be. Ethan unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The woman standing on his porch didn't belong there. She wore a long black coat that probably cost more than his car, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been designed specifically for her body. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that was both severe and elegant, not a strand out of place despite the wind that was currently trying to knock Ethan sideways. Her face was angular, sharp, beautiful in a way that felt deliberate, like she'd decided what kind of beautiful she wanted to be and made it happen through sheer force of will. And her eyes. He knew those eyes. Arya. The name came out like a breath, like a word he'd forgotten how to pronounce. She didn't smile, didn't soften, just looked at him with the kind of focus that made him feel like he was being scanned, assessed, catalogued. Ethan. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, low, controlled, with an edge that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'm here to collect what you owe me. The cold air rushed past her, flooding into the house, but Ethan couldn't move. His brain was stuttering, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the girl he'd known 2 decades ago. Arya Voss. The last time he'd seen her, they were both 12 years old, standing in the parking lot of a summer camp in upstate New York, making promises they were too young to understand. Now she was 30. A billionaire. The CEO of Vostech, one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the world. He'd seen her face on magazine covers in the checkout line at the grocery store. Read articles about her in tech journals. He still skimmed out of habit. And she was standing on his porch in the middle of a blizzard, talking about debts. Can I come in? She didn't wait for an answer. She stepped past him, brushing snow off her shoulders, her boots leaving wet prints on the hardwood floor. Ethan closed the door. His hands felt numb, and not from the cold. You can't just... He stopped. Started again. How did you even find me? Arya turned to face him, and for the first time he saw something flicker across her expression. Not quite amusement. Maybe disappointment? You're not exactly hiding, Ethan. Small town, public records. You own this house. Your daughter goes to Riverside Middle School. You work as an IT consultant for 3 local businesses. She paused. Did you really think you were invisible? I wasn't trying to be invisible. I was trying to be normal. Well, Arya glanced around the living room, at the mismatched furniture, the stack of bills on the coffee table, the framed photos of Mia on the mantel. Congratulations, you succeeded! It should have sounded cruel. Instead, it just sounded factual. Ethan crossed his arms. What do you want, Arya? Before she could answer, a voice came from the top of the stairs. Dad? Who's here? Mia. Ethan turned to see his daughter descending the stairs, her expression curious but cautious. At 14, she had her mother's eyes, bright, perceptive, and his stubborn chin. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and pajama pants with cartoon cats on them, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She stopped halfway down when she saw Arya. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. Arya tilted her head slightly. Hello. Mia's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You're Arya Voss. I am. You're in my house. I am. Mia looked at Ethan, her expression somewhere between shock and accusation. Dad, Arya Voss is in our house. Do you know who she is? I know who she is, Mia. She's on the cover of Forbes. She built an entire tech empire before she was 30. Mia stopped, her brain visibly catching up to the situation. Wait, how do you know her? Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. It's complicated. We were friends, Arya said simply. A long time ago. Mia's eyes narrowed. Friends. More than friends, Arya corrected. We were partners, in a sense. What sense? Arya looked at Ethan. Are you going to tell her, or should I? Ethan felt a headache forming behind his eyes. Mia, can you give us a minute? Absolutely not. Mia, Dietz. Dad, a billionaire just showed up at our door in a blizzard. I'm not going anywhere. Arya made a small sound that might have been a laugh. She's smart. I like that. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. This was not how he'd imagined his evening going. He'd been planning to finish the dishes, watch a documentary about deep-sea creatures, and fall asleep on the couch by 10. Instead, his past had walked through his front door and was currently making friends with his daughter. Fine, he gestured toward the living room. Everyone sit. I'll make coffee. I don't drink coffee after 6, Arya said. Then you can sit there and watch me drink it. He went into the kitchen, mostly because he needed 30 seconds where no one was looking at him. His hands were shaking as he filled the coffee maker with water. Behind him, he could hear Mia and Arya talking. So you really know my dad? I do. From where? A summer program. We were 12. And you just stayed in touch? A pause. Not exactly. Ethan pressed the button on the coffee maker and leaned against the counter, listening. Then why are you here? Mia's voice had shifted, less starstruck, more suspicious. Because I need your father's help. With what? That's between him and me. He's my dad. If you're going to drag him into something, I'm not dragging him anywhere. I'm offering him a choice. The coffee maker gurgled. Ethan grabbed a mug from the cabinet, the one Mia had made him in art class 3 years ago, lopsided and painted with the words "World's Okayest Dad," and poured himself a cup. When he walked back into the living room, Mia was sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, while Arya stood by the window, looking out at the snow. All right. Ethan sat down in the armchair across from Mia. Let's hear it. Arya turned. For a moment, she just looked at him, really looked, like she was trying to see past the tired single dad and the faded jeans and see whoever he used to be. My company is under attack, she said finally. Ethan raised an eyebrow. From who? I don't know. That's the problem. Arya moved away from the window, her movements precise, controlled. Someone inside Voss Tech is leaking critical information, system architectures, client contracts, security protocols. 3 weeks ago, one of our proprietary encryption algorithms showed up on a darknet forum. Last week, a competitor submitted a patent application that was almost identical to a project we've been developing for 18 months. Inside job, Ethan said, obviously. So fire everyone and start over. Arya's expression didn't change. I employ 4,000 people across 6 countries. My company is worth $9 billion. I can't just burn it down and start fresh. Mia leaned forward. Can't you hire, like, a security firm or something? I've hired 3. They found nothing. Arya's jaw tightened. Whoever is doing this knows how we operate. They know our systems. They know our people. They're not some external hacker. They're someone who understands the company from the inside. Ethan took a sip of coffee. It was too hot and tasted like burnt water, but it gave him something to do with his hands. And you think I can help because 20 years ago, you were the best. Arya's voice was flat, matter of fact. You could break into any system. You saw patterns no one else saw. You thought like a criminal and a genius at the same time. That was a long time ago. Talent doesn't disappear, Ethan. It just gets buried under bad decisions. Mia made a small noise. Whoa! Ethan set down his coffee mug. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'm not that person anymore. I'm a single dad who fixes printers and resets passwords for a living. I don't. You're wasting your life. Arya's words cut through the room like a blade. You had a gift, a real one, and you threw it away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mia looked between them, her expression torn between fascination and discomfort. Ethan stood. I think you should leave. Sit down. This is my house. Sit down. There was something in Arya's voice, not anger exactly, authority, the kind of voice that had commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. Ethan sat. Arya walked to the center of the room, her coat still on, snow melting onto the floor. Do you remember what we promised each other? That summer at camp? Ethan's chest tightened. Arya, we made a pact, you, me, and two other kids whose names I can't even remember now. We said that if any of us ever needed help, real help, the others would show up, no matter what, no matter when. We were 12, and I'm here. Arya's eyes locked onto his. I'm asking you to show up. Mia shifted on the couch. Dad, what is she talking about? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was, he did remember. He remembered that summer, the four of them sitting by the lake at midnight, carving their initials into a wooden post, making promises that felt sacred and eternal in the way things do when you're young and stupid and convinced you'll live forever. He remembered Arya even then, fierce, brilliant, unwilling to accept anything less than perfection from herself or anyone else. And he remembered the kid he used to be, the one who thought he could change the world with a keyboard and enough Mountain Dew. I can't help you, he said quietly. Arya's expression didn't change. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Yes. Ethan looked at Mia, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Concern, curiosity, disappointment. I have a life here, he said. A daughter, responsibilities. I can't just drop everything and 6 months. Arya's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Come to New York, work with my team, find the leak. After that, you're free to go back to your printers and passwords. And if I say no? Arya reached into her coat and pulled out a slim envelope. She set it on the coffee table. Then you say no, but before you do, you should know what you're turning down. Ethan stared at the envelope like it might explode. Mia leaned forward. What is that? Open it, Arya said. Ethan didn't move. Mia reached over and grabbed the envelope, tearing it open before he could stop her. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, her eyes scanning the contents. Her face went pale. Dad. Mia, give me that. Dad. She handed him the paper. Ethan looked down. It was a contract, simple, direct, 6 months of work. And at the bottom, a number, $2 million. Plus a clause that guaranteed Mia a full scholarship to any university in the country, including room, board, and living expenses. Ethan's hands started shaking again. This is fair compensation, Arya said, for your time and expertise. This is insane. This is what you're worth. Mia was staring at the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. Dad, I know. That's college. I know, Mia. Arya adjusted her coat. I'm staying at the Riverside Inn tonight. I'll be there until noon tomorrow. If you decide to accept, meet me there. If not, she shrugged. I'll find someone else. She walked to the door, her boots clicking against the hardwood. Arya. Ethan stood. Why me? You have access to the best cybersecurity experts in the world. Why drag me into this? Arya paused, her hand on the doorknob. For a moment, her expression softened, just a fraction. Because I trust you, she said quietly. And right now, I don't trust anyone else. Then she was gone. The door closed behind her and the house fell silent except for the wind howling outside. Mia was still staring at the contract. Ethan sank back into the armchair, his coffee long forgotten. Dad, Mia said finally, you have to do this. Mia, you have to. It's not that simple. Why not? She looked up at him, her eyes bright. She's offering you $2 million. She's offering to pay for college. She's offering you a chance to see to what? Go back to a life I left for a reason? Mia flinched. Ethan immediately regretted his tone. He softened his voice. I'm sorry, this isn't something I can decide in 5 minutes. Then take 10. Mia stood, clutching the contract. But don't say no because you're scared. I'm not scared. You're terrified. She walked past him, heading for the stairs. Halfway up, she stopped. Mom would want you to do this. Ethan's throat tightened. Mia, she would. You know she would. Then she was gone, her door closing softly upstairs. Ethan sat alone in the living room, the contract still on the coffee table, the house creaking around him. Outside, the blizzard raged, and somewhere inside him, something he'd buried a long time ago started to wake up. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table, the contract spread out in front of him, reading the same lines over and over until the words stopped making sense. $2 million, a full scholarship, 6 months. He thought about Mia, about the way she'd looked at that piece of paper, about the way she'd said Mom would want you to do this. His wife, Sarah, had been dead for 6 years, cancer, fast and brutal and unfair. She'd fought like hell, but in the end, the cancer won. After she died, Ethan had done the only thing he could think of. He'd rebuilt his life around Mia. He'd left his job at a major tech firm in Boston, moved to this small Vermont town, and taken contract work that let him be home every night for dinner. He'd made himself small, safe, predictable. And for 6 years, it had worked. But now Arya was here, holding out a future he'd convinced himself he didn't want, at 3 a.m. He walked upstairs and stood outside Mia's door, listening to her breathe. She was 14. In 4 years, she'd be applying to colleges. And unless something changed, those colleges would be the ones they could afford. State schools, community colleges, maybe a scholarship if she worked hard enough. There was nothing wrong with that, but there was also nothing wrong with wanting more for her. He went back downstairs and opened his laptop. It took him less than 10 minutes to find the articles. Vostech faces internal crisis as leaks. Threaten billion-dollar contracts. Industry insiders. Question: Arya Voss's ability to secure her own company. Competitor files. Patent on tech. Identical to Voss Tech project. The articles were recent, detailed, damning. Arya hadn't been exaggerating. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. He'd walked away from this world for a reason. After Sarah died, he couldn't handle the pressure, the long hours, the constant demand to be brilliant. He'd needed something simple, something he could control. But maybe Mia was right. Maybe he'd been running from fear instead of towards safety. At 6 a.m., he heard Mia's door open. She came downstairs in her pajamas, her hair a mess, and sat down across from him without a word. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head. They sat in silence for a while, the contract between them like a third presence. You don't have to do this for me, Mia said finally. I know, but I think you should do it for you. Ethan looked up. What do you mean? Mia picked at a loose thread on her pajama pants. You're always fine. You know, like you're a good dad. You make dinner and help with homework and show up to all my school stuff. But you're just fine. You're never happy. You're never excited about anything. That's not true. When's the last time you did something that scared you? Ethan didn't have an answer. Mia looked at him, and for a moment she looked older than 14. I don't want to end up like that. I don't want to spend my whole life being fine. Her words hit harder than anything Arya had said, because she was right. Ethan had spent 6 years building a life that was safe and predictable and soul-crushingly boring, and he told himself it was for Mia, that he was being responsible, that he was being a good father. But maybe what Mia needed wasn't a father who played it safe. Maybe she needed a father who still knew how to take risks. All right, he said quietly. Mia's head snapped up. All right? I'll meet with her. I'll hear her out. A grin spread across Mia's face, bright, genuine, the kind of smile he hadn't seen in months. Really? Really? She jumped up and hugged him, squeezing tight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I said I'd meet with her. I didn't say yes yet. You will. Mia pulled back, still grinning. I know you will. At 11 a.m., Ethan pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn. The snow had stopped, but the roads were still a mess. It had taken him 20 minutes to drive what should have been a 5-minute trip. He sat in his car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. He could still turn around. Drive home. Pretend Arya Voss had never knocked on his door. Instead, he got out of the car and walked inside. The inn was small, cozy, the kind of place that catered to tourists looking for a quaint New England experience. A fire crackled in the lobby fireplace. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Arya was sitting in a leather armchair near the window, reading something on her phone. She looked up as he approached. You came. I came. She stood, slipping her phone into her pocket. Does that mean you're saying yes? It means I have questions. Arya gestured to the chair across from her. Ask. Ethan sat. Why now? If you've been dealing with leaks for weeks, why wait until now to come find me? Because I tried everything else first. Arya's expression was unreadable. I hired the best security firms, brought in forensic analysts, ran internal audits. Nothing worked. Whoever's doing this is too smart, too careful. I needed someone who thinks differently. And you think I'm that person. I know you're that person. Ethan leaned back. You said you trust me, but we haven't spoken in 20 years. How do you know I haven't changed? Because people don't change as much as they think they do. Arya crossed her legs, her posture relaxed but alert. You were brilliant at 12. You're brilliant now. You just convinced yourself you're not. And if I can't find the leak, then at least I'll know I tried everything. Ethan studied her. There was something she wasn't saying. He could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her fingers drummed once, just once, against the arm of the chair. What aren't you telling me? Arya's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You're scared. I can see it. This isn't just about protecting your company. What's really going on? For a long moment, Arya didn't answer. Then she sighed. If I don't find the leak in the next 3 months, I'll lose everything, she said quietly. My board is already talking about replacing me. Investors are pulling out. Clients are jumping ship. This isn't just a security problem, Ethan. It's existential. And if I say no, then I'll figure something else out. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack underneath. But I'm running out of options. Ethan thought about Mia, about the scholarship, about the life he'd built and the life he'd abandoned. He thought about Sarah and what she would say if she were here. She'd probably call him an idiot for hesitating. 6 months, he said, and Mia comes with me. Arya blinked. What? If I'm doing this, she comes too. I'm not leaving her here alone. Ethan, New York isn't exactly non-negotiable. Arya studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fine, I'll arrange a place for you both, something near the office. And I want full access. No restrictions. If I'm going to find your leak, I need to see everything. Done. And if I find out you're lying to me about anything at all, I walk. Arya stood, extending her hand. Deal. Ethan stood and shook her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. When do we leave, he asked. Friday. I'll send a car. We'll drive. Arya raised an eyebrow. It's an 8-hour drive in good weather. In this snow? We'll drive, Ethan repeated. I need the time to think. Arya nodded slowly. All right, but I expect you in New York by Sunday night. We'll be there. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair and headed for the door. Halfway there, she stopped. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you. Then she was gone. Ethan stood alone in the lobby, the fire crackling behind him, and realized his hands had stopped shaking. For the first time in years, he felt something other than fear. He felt alive. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Ethan's mind was already 3 steps ahead, cataloging everything that needed to happen before Friday. He'd have to talk to his clients, arrange coverage for his contracts, figure out what to do with the house. And then there was Mia. He'd have to pull her out of school, explain to her teachers, pack up her entire life into boxes and suitcases. He was doing this. He was actually doing this. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like exhaling after holding his breath for 6 years. When he pulled into the driveway, Mia was already at the front door, still in her pajamas, her face pressed against the glass. She yanked the door open before he even made it up the steps. "Well?" Ethan walked past her into the house. "We leave Friday," Mia screamed. Not a scared scream, a pure, unfiltered explosion of joy that probably woke up half the neighborhood. She launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck, and for a moment, Ethan forgot about everything else. The contract, the risk, the uncertainty, and just held his daughter. "Thank you," she whispered into his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You might not be thanking me when you see the workload at a New York school," he said, but he was smiling. Mia pulled back, her eyes shining. "I don't care. I'll work harder. I'll do whatever it takes." "I know you will." She grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the stairs. "We have to start packing. Oh my God, what do I even bring? Do they have winter clothes in New York? Obviously they do. It's New York, but like, nice winter clothes. I can't show up looking like—" "Mia, breathe." She stopped on the stairs, turned around and hugged him again. "I'm so proud of you, Dad." Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah, me too." The next 3 days were chaos. Ethan spent Wednesday morning calling his clients, explaining the situation in the vaguest terms possible. He didn't mention Aria or Voss Tech or the fact that he was walking into a corporate crisis. He just said he'd been offered a short-term contract in New York and would be referring them to another IT consultant in town. 2 of them understood. The third accused him of abandoning them right before tax season and hung up on him. Ethan marked that one down as a bridge he'd gladly burn. By Wednesday afternoon, he was at Mia's school, sitting across from her guidance counselor, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had the expression of someone who'd seen too many parents make bad decisions. "New York," she said flatly, "for 6 months, in the middle of the school year. I understand it's not ideal. It's disruptive, Mr. Cole. Mia's a good student, but pulling her out now, right before midterms, could seriously impact her grades." Ethan kept his voice calm. "She'll keep up. I'll make sure of it." Mrs. Patterson sighed and pulled out a folder. "I'll need transfer paperwork, transcripts, proof of enrollment at a New York school. I'll have it to you by Friday. That's 2 days. I'm aware." She studied him for a long moment, then handed him a stack of forms. "She's going to miss her friends." "I know. And she's going to struggle with the transition." "I know that too." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened, just a little. "Make sure she knows this is temporary. Kids her age need stability." Ethan took the forms. "Thank you." That night, he sat with Mia at the kitchen table, helping her sort through what to pack and what to leave behind. "I can't believe we're doing this," Mia said for the 15th time, holding up a hoodie and trying to decide if it was New York worthy. "You've said that." "Because it's insane." She grinned. "The good kind of insane." Ethan smiled. "Yeah." Mia folded the hoodie and added it to the take pile. "Do you think Mom would be mad?" Ethan looked up. "What?" "That we're leaving. Leaving the house. All her stuff is still here." Ethan set down the sweater he'd been holding. "Your mom loved this house, but she loved you more, and she would have wanted you to have every opportunity in the world. Even if it meant leaving? Especially if it meant leaving." Mia nodded slowly. "I miss her." "I know. Me too." They sat in silence for a moment, the house settling around them. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "What if you can't find the person leaking stuff from Aria's company?" Ethan had been asking himself the same question. "Then I'll have tried my best." "But she's paying you a lot of money." "She's paying me to try, not to guarantee success." Mia picked at a loose thread on the hoodie. "Do you think you can do it?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about the years he'd spent fixing routers and troubleshooting email clients. He thought about the person he used to be, the kid who could break into anything, who saw code like other people saw language. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going to find out." By Thursday night, the house looked like a bomb had gone off. Boxes everywhere. Suitcases half-packed. Mia's room stripped of posters and personal items, leaving behind blank walls that felt like an accusation. Ethan stood in the doorway of his bedroom, the room he'd shared with Sarah, and stared at the closet. Her clothes were still in there, not all of them. He'd donated most of them years ago, but some he'd kept. Her favorite sweater, the dress she wore to their wedding, a scarf that still smelled faintly like her perfume. He'd told himself he kept them for Mia, so she'd have something physical to remember her mother by. But really, he'd kept them for himself. Now he was leaving, and the thought of those clothes hanging here in an empty house felt wrong. He pulled out the sweater and the scarf and folded them carefully into his suitcase. The dress? He left. Downstairs, his phone buzzed. A message from Arya. Car will arrive at 8 a.m. Friday. Don't be late. Ethan typed back. We're driving. See you Sunday. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Stubborn as ever, he smiled. You hired me for my personality. I hired you in spite of it. Ethan pocketed his phone and went to check on Mia. She was sitting on her bed, surrounded by half-empty boxes, scrolling through her phone with a frown. What's wrong? He asked. Mia didn't look up. I just told Emily I'm leaving. Emily was Mia's best friend. They'd been inseparable since 2nd grade. What did she say? She said she's happy for me. Mia's voice was flat, but I can tell she's not. Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed. People don't always know how to react when someone they care about does something big. She thinks I'm abandoning her. Are you? Mia looked up sharply. No, of course not. Then tell her that. Mia stared at her phone. What if I get there and hate it? Then we come home. You'd really do that? Walk away from $2 million? Ethan met her eyes. In a heartbeat. Mia's expression softened. She set down her phone and leaned against him. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. Really? Terrified. She laughed, a small sound. But you're doing it anyway. That's kind of how bravery works. They sat like that for a while, the house quiet around them, the future looming like a question neither of them could answer yet. Friday morning arrived too fast. Ethan woke up at 6, his body stiff from sleeping on the couch. He'd given up on his bed around 3 a.m. The two looked wired to sleep, and had spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling and second-guessing every decision he'd made in the past 72 hours. By 7, the car was packed. By 7:30, Mia was standing in the driveway, staring at the house like she was trying to memorize it. You okay? Ethan asked. She nodded. Just saying goodbye. We're coming back. I know. She turned to him. But it won't be the same, will it? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Ethan's stomach dropped. A driver stepped out, a woman in her 40s, professional, with the kind of posture that suggested military training. Mr. Cole? We're driving ourselves, Ethan said. The woman didn't blink. Ms. Voss insisted I escort you. Tell Ms. Voss we'll be fine. She thought you might say that. The woman pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to Ethan. Arya's face appeared, her expression unreadable. Let Maria drive you, she said without preamble. We're driving ourselves. Ethan, I have a dozen things that need to happen before you arrive, and I don't have time to worry about whether you're stuck in traffic on I-95. Let Maria drive. I don't need a babysitter. Then consider her a chauffeur. Arya's eyes narrowed. This isn't a negotiation. Ethan glanced at Mia, who was watching the exchange with barely suppressed amusement. He sighed. Fine. Arya's expression softened just slightly. See you Sunday. The screen went dark. Maria took the phone back and gestured to the SUV. Whenever you're ready. Ethan looked at his car, a 12-year-old sedan with a broken taillight and a bumper held on with duct tape. Then he looked at the SUV, sleek, new, probably worth more than his house. All right, he muttered. Let's go. Mia practically ran to the SUV, throwing her bags in the back and climbing into the seat like she'd just won the lottery. Ethan took one last look at the house. Then he got in the car. Maria pulled away from the curb, and Ethan watched the house disappear in the side mirror, smaller and smaller until it was just another building on another street in a town he'd convinced himself was enough. The drive to New York took 9 hours. Maria didn't talk much, which Ethan appreciated. Mia spent the first 2 hours glued to her phone, texting Emily and half a dozen other friends. Then she fell asleep, her head resting against the window. Ethan stared out at the highway, watching the landscape change from rural Vermont to suburban Connecticut to the sprawling chaos of New York's outer boroughs. Somewhere around Hartford, his phone buzzed. A message from Aria. "Apartment is ready. Address attached. Maria will take you there first." Ethan opened the attachment. The address was in Manhattan, Tribeca. He whistled low. Mia stirred. "What?" "Nothing. Go back to sleep." She didn't. Instead, she sat up and looked out the window. "Are we close?" "Getting there." She pressed her face to the glass, her breath fogging up the window. "I can't believe we're actually doing this." "You've said that about 100 times." "Because it's true." Ethan smiled. By the time they crossed into Manhattan, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city rose around them, towers of glass and steel, lights flickering on one by one, the streets crowded with people who all seemed to know exactly where they were going. Mia's eyes were wide. "It's so big." "Yeah. Do you think we'll get lost?" "Probably." She grinned. Maria navigated the streets with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She pulled up in front of a modern building with a doorman and a lobby that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "This is it," Maria said. Ethan stared up at the building. "You're kidding." "Ms. Voss doesn't kid." A doorman appeared and started unloading their bags before Ethan could protest. Maria handed him a key card. 15th floor, Unit 1504. Ms. Voss will contact you tomorrow with details." "Thank you," Ethan said. Maria nodded and drove off. Ethan and Mia stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by their luggage, staring up at the building. "Well," Mia said, "this is insane." "Yep." They went inside. The apartment was worse than Ethan expected. Not worse in quality. Worse in the sense that it was so far beyond anything he could have imagined that it felt like a prank. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A kitchen with appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. Furniture that was somehow both modern and comfortable. Mia dropped her bag and ran to the window. "Oh my God!" Ethan set down his suitcase and joined her. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights, rivers of traffic, buildings that seemed to go on forever. "We live here now," Mia whispered. "For 6 months." Still, Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I think... yeah." They stood there for a long time, watching the city move beneath them. Finally, Mia yawned. "I'm starving. There's probably a pizza place nearby." "In New York? Probably 100. They ordered pizza. It arrived in 20 minutes, hot and greasy and exactly what they needed. They ate on the couch, boxes scattered around them, the TV on but muted. "Dad?" Mia said through a mouthful of cheese. "Yeah?" "Thank you for doing this." Ethan looked at her, his daughter, who was braver than he'd ever been. "Thank you for pushing me," he said. She smiled and took another bite. That night, after Mia went to bed, Ethan stood at the window again. His phone buzzed. "Aria. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Voss Tech headquarters. Don't be late." He typed back, "I won't." Then he stared out at the city and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of traffic 15 floors below. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then it all came rushing back. The decision, the drive, the apartment that felt like it belonged to someone else. He checked the time. 6:30 a.m. He got up, showered, and put on the nicest clothes he owned, a button-down shirt that was only slightly wrinkled and pants that didn't have paint stains on them. Mia was already awake, sitting at the kitchen counter with a bowl of cereal. "You look nervous," she said. "I'm not nervous." "You're wearing your interview shirt." Ethan looked down. She was right. This was the shirt he'd worn to every job interview for the past 6 years. "It's a good shirt," he said defensively. Mia grinned. "It's fine. You look great." He poured himself coffee and tried not to think about the fact that in 2 hours, he'd be walking into a building full of people who probably all had advanced degrees and years of experience in fields he'd abandoned. "What are you going to do today?" he asked. Mia shrugged. "Explore, I guess. Maybe find a bookstore. Figure out where school is." Don't go too far. Dad, I'm 14. I can handle a bookstore. I know, I'll be careful. She set down her spoon. You should go. You don't want to be late. Ethan checked the time again. 7:15. He grabbed his jacket. Text me if you need anything. I will. He hesitated at the door. Mia? Yeah? If this doesn't work out, it will. But if it doesn't, Dad. She looked at him, her expression serious. You've got this. Ethan nodded, even though he didn't feel like he had anything. Then he left. Vostech headquarters was a 30-minute subway ride from the apartment. Ethan had looked up the directions the night before, but actually navigating the subway system was a different story. He got on the wrong train twice, had to backtrack, and almost missed his stop. By the time he emerged onto the street, it was 8:50. He stood in front of the building and stared up. Vostech occupied the top 15 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. The lobby was all marble and steel, with the company logo etched into the wall in letters that were probably taller than Ethan. He walked inside. A security guard stopped him immediately. Name? Ethan Cole. I'm here to see Aria Voss. The guard checked his tablet. ID? Ethan handed over his driver's license. The guard scanned it, handed it back, and gave him a visitor badge. 40th floor. Elevators are on your right. Ethan clipped the badge to his shirt and headed for the elevators. The ride-up was smooth, silent, and slightly nauseating. When the doors opened, he stepped into a reception area that looked like it cost more than his house. A woman behind the desk looked up. Mr. Cole? Yes. Ms. Voss is expecting you. Follow me. She led him through a maze of hallways, past conference rooms and open workspaces filled with people who all looked young and confident and like they knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan felt like an imposter. Finally, they reached a corner office with glass walls. Aria was inside, sitting at a desk that was almost comically large, typing on a laptop. The receptionist knocked once. Mr. Cole is here. Aria looked up. Send him in. The receptionist stepped aside and Ethan walked into the office. Aria stood. She was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car, her hair pulled back in the same severe style as before. You're late, she said. I got lost. You'll get used to it. She gestured to a chair. Sit. Ethan sat. Aria walked around the desk and leaned against it, arms crossed. How was the drive? Long? And the apartment? Excessive. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. You're welcome. Ethan set his bag down. So, what now? Aria picked up a tablet from her desk and handed it to him. This is everything we know so far about the leaks. Dates, systems affected, data that was compromised. It's not much. Ethan scrolled through the file. She was right. It wasn't much. But it was enough to see the pattern. Whoever's doing this knows your security protocols inside and out, he said. I know. And they're patient. These leaks are spaced out, deliberate, not someone in a rush. I know that too. Ethan looked up. Then what do you need me for? Aria's expression hardened. Because knowing something and proving it are two different things. I need you to find out who, and I need evidence that will hold up in court. You think it's someone specific. I have suspicions. Want to share? Aria walked back around her desk and pulled up a file on her computer. She turned the screen toward him. 3 faces. David Huang, Chief Technology Officer. Been with the company since the beginning. You think it's him? He has access to everything, and he's been distant lately. Ethan studied the photo. David looked to be in his mid-30s, serious, competent. Who else? Rachel Kwan, head of security. Ironic, I know. Rachel looked younger, sharper, like someone who didn't miss details. And the third? Marcus Lee, lead engineer, brilliant, arrogant. Left the company 6 months ago after a disagreement about intellectual property. Ethan leaned back. So you think it's an inside job or a revenge play? Could be both. He scrolled through the files again, his mind already working through the possibilities. This was what he used to be good at, seeing connections, finding the thread that didn't belong. I'll need full access, he said, to the systems, to the personnel files, to everything. Done. And I work alone. Arya's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I don't work well with committees. If you want me to do this, I do it my way. Ethan, non-negotiable. They stared at each other. Finally, Arya nodded. Fine. But you report to me. Daily. Deal. She handed him a key card. This will get you into any room in the building. And this, she pulled out a laptop, is yours, pre-configured with access to our internal systems. Ethan took the laptop. Where do I start? With David. He's in a meeting right now, but I'll introduce you this afternoon. And the others? Rachel's office is on the 38th floor. Marcus, I'll arrange a meeting. Ethan stood. All right, let's do this. Arya walked him to the door. Ethan? Yeah? Don't make me regret this. He looked at her, really looked. Behind the sharp suit and sharper edges, he could see the girl from camp, the one who made promises she intended to keep. I won't, he said. And for the first time since he'd said yes, he actually believed it. The office Arya assigned him was small, windowless, and tucked into a corner of the 39th floor that felt like it had been forgotten by the rest of the building. A desk, a chair, a dying plant someone had abandoned months ago. Ethan didn't care. He'd worked in worse. He set up the laptop, logged in with the credentials Arya had given him, and stared at the screen. The system was impressive. Clean architecture, military-grade encryption. Whoever had built Vostek's infrastructure knew what they were doing, which made the leaks even more troubling. Ethan pulled up the timeline Arya had shown him earlier. The first leak happened 4 months ago, a minor breach, just enough to be noticed but not enough to cause panic. Then nothing for 6 weeks. Then another leak, bigger this time. Then another. The pattern was escalating. He opened a terminal window and started digging. By noon, his eyes were burning and his back hurt from sitting in a chair that had clearly been designed by someone who hated the human spine. He stood, stretched, and checked his phone. 3 messages from Mia. Found a bookstore. It's amazing. Also found a coffee shop. The barista has purple hair and a nose ring. I think I'm in love. When are you coming home? Ethan smiled and typed back, Late! There's leftovers in the fridge. Don't burn the place down. No promises. He pocketed his phone and headed out into the hallway. The office was alive with the hum of people working, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, conversations happening in clusters around desks. Everyone moved with purpose, like they were part of some well-oiled machine. Ethan felt out of place. Again. He made his way to the elevator and took it down to the 38th floor. Rachel Kwan's office was easy to find. It was the one with the door half open and the sound of someone arguing on the phone. Ethan knocked. The arguing stopped. Come in. He pushed the door open. Rachel was younger than her photo suggested, maybe late 20s, with sharp features and an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie that had the Vostek logo on it, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She hung up the phone and looked at him. You're Ethan. How'd you know? Arya sent out a memo. New consultant, former hotshot, here to save us all. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Ethan sat. Rachel leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So, what do you want to know? Tell me about the leaks. Which ones? All of them. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've got time? I've got 6 months. She studied him for a moment, then pulled up a file on her computer. First leak was in September. Someone accessed our client database and pulled contract details for 3 major accounts. We didn't even know it happened until one of those clients called asking why a competitor knew their renewal terms. How'd they get in? That's the question, isn't it? Rachel turned the screen toward him. No forced entry, no malware, no phishing attempts. Whoever did it had legitimate credentials. Ethan scanned the logs. She was right. Clean access, no red flags. You think it's an inside job? I know it's an inside job. Rachel's voice was tight. But proving it is a different story. Arya said you've been investigating. For 3 months, and I've got nothing. She closed the file. Whoever's doing this is good. Better than good. They know how to cover their tracks. Better than you? Rachel's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? No offense, I'm just trying to understand what we're up against. She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Yeah, better than me. Which pisses me off more than you can imagine. Ethan leaned back. Walk me through your process. What have you tried? Everything. Forensic analysis of every system that was accessed. Background checks on anyone with admin privileges. Monitored network traffic. Installed tripwires on sensitive files. She ticked off each item on her fingers. Nothing. It's like chasing a ghost. What about the timing? The leaks are spaced out, deliberate. I know. That's what makes me think it's personal. This isn't someone trying to get rich quick. This is someone with a vendetta. Ethan thought about the 3 names Arya had given him. You have any theories? Rachel hesitated. Off the record? Sure. David's too careful. If it were him, we'd never know. Marcus has motive. He left angry, filed a lawsuit, the whole thing, but he doesn't have access anymore. We revoked all his credentials the day he walked out. And you? Rachel blinked. What? You're on Arya's list of suspects. For a second, Rachel looked like she might throw him out of her office. Then she laughed. A real laugh this time. Yeah, I know. It's the ultimate irony, right? Head of security turns out to be the leak. She shook her head. For what it's worth, it's not me. But I don't blame Arya for being paranoid. I would be too. Ethan believed her, or at least he wanted to. Can I see the access logs for the past 6 months? He asked. Rachel pulled up another file and transferred it to a USB drive. Knock yourself out. But I'm telling you, there's nothing there. Ethan took the drive. Thanks. Hey, Rachel stopped him as he stood to leave. You really think you can figure this out? I don't know, but I'm going to try. She nodded. Good. Because if this keeps up, there won't be a company left to save. Ethan spent the rest of the afternoon buried in data. Access logs, system records, personnel files. He cross-referenced timestamps, flagged anomalies, built timelines that went nowhere. Rachel was right. There was nothing obvious. But that didn't mean there was nothing. Ethan had learned a long time ago that the best hackers didn't leave breadcrumbs. They left absence, gaps where something should have been, but wasn't. He started looking for the gaps. By 6 o'clock, he had a headache and a list of 12 employees who had accessed sensitive systems in the hours before each leak. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He was about to pack up when his phone rang. Arya. You still here? She asked. Yeah. Good. David just got out of his meeting. I want you to meet him. Now? Unless you have somewhere better to be. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Where? Conference room B, 40th floor. He took the elevator up and found the conference room. Through the glass walls, he could see Arya sitting at a table with a man in his mid-30s, Asian, dressed in a suit that looked expensive but worn, like he'd had it for years and refused to replace it. David Huang. Ethan pushed open the door. Arya looked up. David, this is Ethan Cole, the consultant I mentioned. David stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm, his expression neutral. Pleasure. Likewise. They sat. Arya wasted no time. Ethan's here to help us find the source of the leaks. I want you to give him full access to the engineering team's systems. David's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. All of them? All of them. That's a lot of sensitive information. I'm aware. David looked at Ethan. No offense, but I don't know you, and you're asking for access to some of our most critical infrastructure. I understand your concern, Ethan said, but I can't do my job if I'm working with one hand tied behind my back. And I can't do mine if I'm handing out admin credentials to every consultant who walks through the door. Arya's voice cut through the tension. David, this isn't a debate. Ethan has my full authorization. If you have a problem with that, we can discuss it. But the access is non-negotiable. David stared at her, his jaw tight. Then he nodded. Fine. I'll have the credentials sent over by end of day. Thank you. David stood. Anything else? That's all. He left without another word. Ethan watched him go. He doesn't trust me. He doesn't trust anyone. Arya leaned back in her chair. David's brilliant, paranoid, and convinced that everyone's out to steal his work. Is he right? Sometimes? Ethan thought about the way David had reacted, the hesitation, the defensiveness. You really think it could be him? Arya didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. I don't want it to be him. David and I built this company together. He's been with me since the beginning, but he's been different lately, distracted, defensive, and he's the only person besides me who has access to every system that's been compromised. Ethan processed that. What about Rachel? Rachel has access too, but she's also the one who's been trying to stop the leaks. It would be a hell of a long con. People have done worse for less. Arya stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, lights flickering on as the sun set. I need you to find the truth, Ethan. Not the answer I want, the truth. Even if it's someone you trust? Especially then. Ethan joined her at the window. This is going to get messy. It already is. They stood in silence for a moment. How's Mia? Arya asked. The question caught him off guard. She's good, adjusting. She seems like a smart kid. She is. Takes after her father, Ethan smiled. She'd argue she takes after her mother. Arya glanced at him. You don't talk about her much. About Mia? About your wife. Ethan's chest tightened. Not much to say. She died. Life moved on. Did it? He looked at her. What's that supposed to mean? You left everything behind when she died. Your career, your life, you buried yourself in a small town and convinced yourself you were doing it for Mia. But maybe you were doing it for you. Ethan's jaw clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Arya's voice was sharp now. You were one of the best, Ethan, and you walked away because you were scared. I walked away because I had a daughter to raise. You walked away because it was easier than facing what you lost. The words hit like a punch. Ethan turned away from the window. I should go. Ethan, I'll see you tomorrow. He left before she could say anything else. The subway ride home was a blur. Ethan's mind was spinning, Arya's words echoing in his head. You walked away because it was easier than facing what you lost. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. He'd stayed for Mia. He'd rebuilt his life for her. Everything he'd done had been for her. Hadn't it? By the time he got back to the apartment, it was almost 8. Mia was on the couch, eating cereal straight from the box and watching some reality show about people trying to survive on a deserted island. You're home, she said without looking away from the screen. I'm home. How was it? Ethan dropped his bag by the door and collapsed into the chair. Long. Did you find the bad guy? Not yet. Mia finally looked at him. You okay? Yeah, just tired. She studied him for a moment, then muted the TV. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing. You're doing that thing where you rub your neck when you're stressed. Ethan dropped his hand. It's just a lot. Being back in this world, dealing with all these people who are younger and smarter and better than you? Yeah. Mia set down the cereal box. You know that's not true, right? Mia, you're the smartest person I know, and I don't just mean with computers. You're smart about people, about how things work. She paused. You just forgot that about yourself. Ethan looked at his daughter, this kid who somehow saw him more clearly than he saw himself. When did you get so wise? He asked. I've always been wise, you just never listen. He laughed, and some of the tension in his chest eased. Thanks, kid. Anytime. She unmuted the TV. Now stop being sad and watch this guy try to build a shelter out of palm leaves. It's hilarious. Ethan watched, and for a little while, he forgot about leaks and suspects and the weight of expectations he wasn't sure he could meet. The next 3 weeks blurred together. Ethan fell into a routine. Up at 6, subway to the office, hours spent staring at code and access logs and personnel files, meetings with Rachel, with David, with engineers whose names he forgot as soon as they introduced themselves. He was looking for patterns, for the thread that didn't belong. And slowly, he started to find them. It wasn't one thing. It was a dozen small things that didn't quite add up. A login from an IP address that pinged to a location 200 miles away, even though the employee had been in the office that day. A file accessed at 3 in the morning by someone whose keycard showed they'd left the building at 6. A pattern of data transfers that were just small enough to avoid triggering alerts but consistent enough to be deliberate. Ethan built spreadsheets, drew diagrams, connected dots that most people wouldn't have seen, and he kept coming back to one name, David Huang. Not because David was sloppy, because he was too careful. Every access David made was logged, every action documented, every file he touched had a timestamp and a reason. It was textbook behavior for someone who knew they were being watched, but it was also textbook behavior for someone with nothing to hide. Ethan couldn't tell which. He was in his office late one Thursday night, staring at another dead-end lead, when his phone buzzed. Mia, Dad, you need to come home. His heart stopped. What's wrong? Just come home. Now. Ethan grabbed his coat and ran. The subway felt like it took hours. By the time he burst through the apartment door, his hands were shaking and his mind was racing through every worst-case scenario. Mia was sitting on the couch, alive, unhurt. And next to her was a woman Ethan didn't recognize. She was maybe 40, dressed in jeans and a blazer, with kind eyes and a notebook in her lap. Mr. Cole, she said, standing. Ethan looked at Mia. What's going on? This is Ms. Parker, Mia said quietly. She's from my school. Ethan's stomach dropped. What happened? Ms. Parker gestured to the chair. Please, sit. Ethan sat. Ms. Parker folded her hands. Mia got into a fight today. A fight? With another student. It was physical. Ethan looked at Mia, who was staring at her hands. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head. Is the other kid hurt? Bruised, Ms. Parker said. But fine. Ethan exhaled. Okay. What happened? Mia didn't answer. Ms. Parker glanced at her notes. According to witnesses, the other student made some comments about Mia being new, about where she came from. It escalated. What kind of comments? Mia finally looked up. She said I didn't belong here, that I was just some small-town hick pretending to fit in. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you hit her. She shoved me first. Mia, I'm not going to just stand there and let someone push me around, Dad. Miss Parker cleared her throat. Regardless of who started it, the school has a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations. Mia's been suspended for 3 days. Ethan closed his eyes. Okay. I also wanted to talk to you about Mia's adjustment. The transition to a new school can be difficult, especially in the middle of the year. We have resources, counselors, peer mentors. We're fine, Ethan said. Ms. Parker looked at him. Mr. Cole, I understand this move was sudden, but Mia's struggling, and if we don't address it now, I said we're fine. The room went silent. Ms. Parker stood. If you change your mind, my contact information is in the folder I left on the table. She looked at Mia. I'll see you Monday. Mia nodded. Precis. Parker left. Ethan and Mia sat in silence. Finally, Ethan spoke. You want to tell me what really happened? Mia's eyes filled with tears. I hate it here. The words hit harder than he expected. Mia, everyone there is rich and perfect, and they all know each other, and I'm just the weird new girl who doesn't know anything. She wiped her eyes. I thought it would be different. I thought I'd fit in, but I don't. Ethan moved to sit next to her. Hey, look at me. She did. You've been here 3 weeks. That's nothing. Give it time. What if it doesn't get better? Then we figure it out, together. Mia leaned against him. I'm sorry. For what? For making you come home. For screwing this up. You didn't screw anything up. He put his arm around her. You're doing the best you can. That's all I ask. They sat like that for a while. Dad? Mia said quietly. Yeah? Do you ever regret it? Coming here? Ethan thought about the question. About the long hours and the pressure and the feeling that he was always one step behind. But he also thought about the work, the challenge, the way his brain felt alive again. No, he said, I don't. Even though it's hard, especially because it's hard. Mia nodded against his shoulder, and Ethan realized something. Arya had been right. He had been running from his past, from his potential, from the fear that he wasn't enough. But being here, fighting through the hard parts, was teaching him that maybe he was. The next morning, Ethan was back in the office by 7. He pulled up David's files again, looked at them from a different angle, and that's when he saw it. A pattern he'd missed before. Every time there was a leak, David's access logs showed normal activity, expected behavior. But there was a gap. A small window, sometimes only 10 or 15 minutes, where David's activity would pause. And during those gaps, another account would access the same systems. An account that belonged to a junior engineer named Kevin Park. Ethan's pulse quickened. He pulled up Kevin's file. 24 years old, MIT grad, hired 8 months ago, worked directly under David, and he'd been logged into the system during every single leak. Ethan stood and headed for Arya's office. She was on the phone when he walked in, but she held up a finger. He waited. When she hung up, she looked at him. "You found something?" "I think so." He showed her the data. Arya's expression darkened as she read. "Kevin Park. You know him?" "Barely. He's quiet, keeps his head down. He also has access to everything David does, and his login times match every leak." Arya stared at the screen. This could be it. Or it could be a setup. If David wanted to throw suspicion off himself, Kevin would be the perfect fall guy. Arya looked at him. "What do you need?" "Access to Kevin's workstation, his personal files, and I need to do it without him knowing." Arya pulled out her phone. "I'll have security pull him into a meeting. You'll have 30 minutes. That's enough." 20 minutes later, Ethan was sitting at Kevin's desk, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The workstation was clean, too clean. No personal files, no browsing history, no traces of anything that wasn't work-related, which was exactly what someone would do if they were covering their tracks. Ethan dug deeper, checked deleted files, scanned the hard drive for hidden partitions, and then he found it. A folder, encrypted, buried 3 layers deep. He cracked the encryption in under 5 minutes. Inside were files, dozens of them, client contracts, system architectures, proprietary algorithms, everything that had been leaked. Ethan's hands started shaking. He'd found it. He'd actually found it. He copied the files to a secure drive and left Kevin's desk exactly as he'd found it. When he got back to Arya's office, she was waiting. "Well?" He handed her the drive. "It's him." Arya plugged it into her computer. Her face went pale as she scrolled through the files. "Kevin Park," she said quietly. "Yeah." She looked up. "You're sure?" The files were on his workstation. Encrypted. Hidden. "This is enough to go to the police." Arya leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "We need to confront him," she said. "Arya, if he runs, he won't run. Not if we do this right." She stood. "Get Rachel. I want this airtight." An hour later, Kevin Park was sitting in a conference room, flanked by Arya, Ethan, and Rachel. He looked confused, scared. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. Arya slid a printout across the table. "We found these files on your computer." Kevin looked down. His face went white. I don't... "Don't lie," Rachel said. "We have the logs. We have the evidence. Just tell us why." Kevin's hands were shaking. "It wasn't my idea." Arya leaned forward. "Whose idea was it?" Kevin looked up, tears in his eyes. "David's?" The room went silent. "He said it was for insurance," Kevin continued, his voice breaking. "He said the company was going under, that we needed leverage. He told me it would just be small stuff, nothing that would hurt anyone." "And you believed him?" Rachel's voice was ice. "He's my boss. I trusted him." Ethan watched Kevin fall apart and felt something twist in his gut. This kid wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a pawn. Arya stood. "Where's David now?" "I don't know. He wasn't in his office this morning." Arya looked at Rachel. "Find him." Rachel was already on her phone. Ethan stayed with Kevin while Arya and Rachel coordinated with security. "I'm sorry," Kevin whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't have anything to say. 30 minutes later, Rachel came back. "David's gone. Cleared out his office, his apartment, his car's missing." Arya's expression was stone. "He ran." "We'll find him," Rachel said. But Ethan wasn't so sure. Because David Huang was smart, careful, and if he'd planned this from the beginning, he was already 3 steps ahead. Arya looked at Ethan. "We need to talk." They went back to her office. She closed the door and leaned against her desk, her composure finally cracking. "He was my friend," she said quietly. "I know. I trusted him. I know." She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she looked vulnerable. Did I miss something? Some sign that he was… No. Ethan's voice was firm. He was good. He covered his tracks. You couldn't have known. But you figured it out. Barely. Arya closed her eyes. What do I do now? You move forward. You fix the damage. You rebuild. With what? Half my executive team just imploded. Ethan stepped closer. With the people who are still here, the ones who didn't betray you. Arya opened her eyes. Like you? Like me. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Let's get to work. The weeks after David disappeared felt like standing in the aftermath of an earthquake. The ground had stopped shaking, but everything was still broken. Vostech went into crisis mode. Emergency board meetings, damage control with clients, press releases that danced around the truth without actually lying. Arya was everywhere at once, on calls with investors and meetings with legal, briefing the executive team about restructuring. Ethan watched her handle it all with a kind of controlled fury that was almost impressive, but he could see the cracks, the way her jaw tightened when someone mentioned David's name, the way she'd pause sometimes, mid-sentence, like she'd forgotten what she was saying, the way she stayed at the office until midnight, then came back at 6 in the morning like she hadn't slept at all. She probably hadn't. Kevin Park was cooperating fully. Too fully. He'd handed over emails, text messages, recordings of conversations with David that painted a picture of manipulation that made Ethan's stomach turn. David had groomed him, slowly, carefully, convinced him that what they were doing was necessary, righteous even. The federal investigation was moving forward, but David was gone, really gone. No credit card transactions, no phone activity, no digital footprint at all. He'd vanished like smoke. Rachel was running point on the internal cleanup, systematically closing security holes and implementing new protocols that made the old ones look like they'd been designed by children. She worked 18-hour days and drank coffee like it was a competitive sport, and Ethan kept digging. Because something about the whole thing didn't sit right. David was smart, ruthless, apparently, but the leaks had been sloppy in places, deliberate in others, like 2 different people had been working toward 2 different goals. He was sitting in his office one Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after David disappeared, when his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Ethan Cole. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice he recognized. You're good. I'll give you that. David. Ethan's blood went cold. He gestured frantically through the glass wall of his office, trying to get Rachel's attention. She looked up, saw his face, and started moving. Where are you? Ethan asked, keeping his voice calm. Somewhere you'll never find me. David sounded tired, resigned. I just wanted to call and tell you that you got it wrong. Wrong about what? About why I did it. Rachel burst into the office, already on her phone, probably alerting the FBI to trace the call. Then tell me, Ethan said. Help me understand. David laughed, bitter. You think I wanted to destroy the company? You think I wanted to hurt Arya? Then why? Because she wouldn't listen. David's voice cracked. I told her we were overextended, that we were taking on too much risk, that the tech wasn't ready, but she kept pushing, kept expanding, kept making promises we couldn't keep. So you sabotaged her. I tried to slow her down, make her see reason, but she just kept going. Ethan looked at Rachel, who was listening to the call on speakerphone now, her expression dark. You used Kevin, Ethan said. Kevin was ambitious, easy to convince. I needed someone who could access the systems without raising flags. And when it all fell apart, you ran. I didn't run. I chose a different path. David paused. Tell Arya I'm sorry, for what it's worth. Tell her yourself. I can't. She'd never forgive me. You're right. She won't. The line went dead. Rachel immediately called it in, but Ethan already knew it was pointless. David had probably used a burner phone, probably nowhere near his actual location. "Son of a bitch," Rachel muttered. Ethan sat back in his chair, his mind racing. David's words echoed in his head. She wouldn't listen. He thought about Arya, about the way she drove herself, the way she pushed everyone around her, the way she refused to accept anything less than perfection. It was what made her successful. But it was also what had driven David to betray her. That night, Ethan stayed late at the office. Most of the building was empty by 8, just security guards and a few workaholics scattered across different floors. He was reviewing financial reports, trying to see if there was any truth to David's claim that the company was overextended, when Arya appeared in his doorway. She looked exhausted. Her hair was down, which he'd never seen before. She'd lost the blazer somewhere, left in just a white shirt that was wrinkled from a long day. "You're still here," she said. "So are you." She walked in and sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Rachel told me about the call." "Yeah." "What did he say?" Ethan hesitated, then he told her. Everything. Arya listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "He's not entirely wrong," she said finally. "About what?" "About me not listening." She looked at him. "I don't take criticism well. I never have. When someone tells me something can't be done, I hear it as a challenge, not as advice. That's not always a bad thing. It is when it costs you everything." Ethan leaned forward. "You didn't cost yourself anything. David made his choice. He could have quit. He could have pushed back harder. He could have done 100 things that weren't corporate espionage. But would I have listened?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Arya stood and walked to the window. The city was alive below, millions of lights stretching out to the horizon. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm doing this for," she said quietly. "Building this company, chasing growth. It feels like I'm running towards something I can't even see." "You're building something that matters, something that helps people." "Am I? Or am I just feeding my own ego?" Ethan joined her at the window. "Can it be both?" She looked at him, surprised. Then she smiled. A real smile, not the corporate one she wore in meetings. "When did you get so wise?" "I have a teenage daughter. Wisdom is a survival skill." Arya laughed. It was the first time he'd heard her really laugh since David disappeared. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the city. "Thank you," Arya said, "for everything. For coming here, for finding the leak, for not giving up when it got hard. I haven't done anything special. You came back. That's more than most people would have done." Ethan thought about the past few weeks, about Mia struggling at school, about the long hours and the stress and the constant feeling that he was barely keeping his head above water. But he also thought about the work, the challenge, the way it felt to use his brain again in ways he'd forgotten. "I'm glad I came," he said. Arya turned to face him. "Me too." There was something in the way she looked at him, something that made his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with work. He took a step back. "I should go. Mia's probably wondering where I am." "Right, of course." Arya's expression shuddered. "I'll see you tomorrow." Ethan grabbed his jacket and left before he could do something stupid. When he got home, Mia was asleep on the couch, her laptop open on her stomach, headphones still in her ears. Ethan carefully removed the headphones and closed the laptop. She stirred. "Dad?" "Hey, come on, let's get you to bed." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What time is it?" "Late. Sorry." Mia stood and shuffled toward her room, then stopped. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I made a friend today." Ethan felt something in his chest loosen. "Yeah?" "Her name's Sophie. She's in my English class. She's really into photography, and she thinks reality TV is stupid, which is basically the foundation of any good friendship." Ethan smiled. "That's great, kid. She invited me to hang out this weekend. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay." Mia grinned, then disappeared into her room. Ethan stood in the quiet apartment, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next few weeks settled into a new normal. The FBI was still searching for David, but the trail was cold. Kevin had been quietly let go with a severance package that came with an ironclad NDA. Arya hired a new CTO, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had a reputation for being brilliant and utterly incorruptible. Vostek was stabilizing, clients were staying, investors were cautiously optimistic. The crisis wasn't over, but it was contained. Ethan's role was evolving. What had started as a 6-month contract to find a leak was turning into something else. Arya wanted him to stay on, help rebuild the security infrastructure, consult on major decisions. She hadn't officially offered him a permanent position yet, but he could feel it coming. And he wasn't sure what he wanted to do about it. Mia was thriving. Her suspension was ancient history. She and Sophie were inseparable now, spending weekends exploring the city, taking photos, being normal teenagers in ways that made Ethan's heart ache with relief. She'd stopped talking about going back to Vermont, started talking about applying to schools in New York, about staying, which should have made Ethan happy. Instead, it terrified him, because staying meant committing to this life, to this city, to a future that was bigger and scarier and more uncertain than the one he'd left behind. He was thinking about all of this one Saturday morning when his phone rang. Arya. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "Not over the phone. Can you come to the office?" "Now?" "Please." Something in her voice made him say yes. He told Mia he'd be back in a few hours, grabbed his coat, and headed out. The office was mostly empty on weekends, just a few people scattered across different floors, working on projects that couldn't wait until Monday. Arya was in her office, pacing. "What's going on?" Ethan asked. She handed him a tablet. "Read this." It was an email from David. Ethan's pulse quickened as he read. "Arya, I know you're looking for me. I know the FBI is looking for me. I'm writing to tell you that you won't find me, not because I'm hiding, but because I don't exist anymore. I destroyed everything, my identity, my past. I've become someone else, somewhere else. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to understand why I did what I did. I loved that company. I loved what we built together. But I watched you burn yourself out chasing something that couldn't be sustained. And when I tried to tell you, you didn't listen. So I tried to force you to slow down, to see that growth isn't always good, that sometimes the best thing you can do is stop. I was wrong. I see that now. I hurt people. I hurt you, and I'll have to live with that. But I also need you to live with the truth. You were wrong too. You pushed too hard. You ignored the warnings. You built an empire on a foundation that was already cracking. Fix it, Arya. Not for me. For the people who still believe in you. Goodbye. D. Ethan set down the tablet. When did you get this? An hour ago. Have you sent it to the FBI? Not yet. Arya was still pacing. I wanted to talk to you first. About what? She stopped and looked at him. Is he right? About what? About me. About pushing too hard. About ignoring the warnings. Ethan thought about how to answer. About the Arya he'd seen over the past 2 months. Driven, brilliant, uncompromising. Yeah, he said finally. He's right. Arya flinched like he'd slapped her. But, Ethan continued, that doesn't excuse what he did. You can be wrong and still be the victim. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. So what do I do? You do what he said. You fix it. You build something better. Arya sat down in her chair, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. I don't know if I can, she said quietly. Yes, you can. How do you know? Because I've watched you for 2 months. I've seen you handle crises that would have broken most people. I've seen you make hard decisions and stand by them. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Arya looked up at him. Then why does it feel like I'm falling apart? Because strength isn't the same as invincibility. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to doubt yourself. That's what makes you human. She was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and walked over to him. Stay, she said. What? Stay, not for 6 months, permanently. Help me rebuild this company into something better, something sustainable. Ethan's heart was pounding. Arya, I know it's a lot to ask. I know you have a life, a daughter, but I can offer you equity, a real position, chief security officer, a seat at the table. That's not... And I can offer you something else. She stepped closer. A partnership, a real one, not just professionally. Ethan's breath caught. I don't know what this is, Arya continued, her voice softer now. Between us, But I know it's not nothing, and I think you feel it too. He did. He'd been feeling it for weeks. Every late-night conversation, every shared moment of frustration and triumph. Every time she looked at him like he was more than just a consultant. But he also thought about Mia, about the life he'd built, about the promises he'd made to himself after Sarah died. I need time, he said. Arya nodded. Take all the time you need. And I need to talk to Mia. Of course. Ethan stepped back, putting distance between them. I should go. Ethan, I'll call you, I promise. He left before she could say anything else. The walk home felt like it took forever. His mind was racing. Arya's offer, the job, the implication of something more. It was everything he'd walked away from 6 years ago. The career, the pressure, the risk. But it was also everything he'd been missing. The challenge, the purpose, the feeling that what he did mattered. When he got back to the apartment, Mia was in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches. You're back early, she said. Yeah. She looked at him. What's wrong? Nothing. I need to talk to you about something. Mia turned off the stove and sat down at the counter. Okay. Ethan pulled up a chair across from her. Arya offered me a permanent job. Mia's eyes lit up. That's amazing. It would mean staying in New York long term, maybe permanently. Okay. Mia, this is a big decision. It would change everything. I know. She looked at him, her expression serious. But isn't that the point? What do you mean? Dad, we came here because you were stuck. Because I was stuck. And yeah, it's been hard. But it's also been good. I've made friends. You're actually happy for the first time in years. Why would we go back? Because New York is expensive. Because the pace is exhausting. Because I don't want you to grow up in a place that chews people up and spits them out. Mia reached across the counter and took his hand. Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. I can handle it. And I think you can too. What if I can't? What if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you tried. Ethan looked at his daughter, this kid who had somehow become wiser than he was. When did you grow up? He asked. She smiled. You weren't paying attention. They sat in silence for a moment. There's something else, Ethan said. Arya, she wants more than just a professional relationship. Mia raised an eyebrow. Like, she likes you? I think so, yeah. And do you like her? Ethan hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. Why? Because of your mom. Because I haven't thought about someone like that since she died. Mia squeezed his hand. Dad, Mom's been gone for 6 years, and she would want you to be happy. You know that, right? Ethan's eyes burned. I know. So why are you fighting this? Because I'm scared. Of what? Of everything. Of failing. Of losing you. Of screwing this up. Mia stood and hugged him. You're not going to lose me. And you're not going to screw this up. You just have to stop being so afraid. Ethan held his daughter and felt something break loose in his chest. All this time, he'd thought he was protecting her, keeping her safe, giving her stability. But maybe what she really needed was to see him take risks, to see him choose growth over comfort, to see him live instead of just survive. All right, he said. We're staying. Mia pulled back, grinning. Really? Really. She hugged him again, tighter this time. Thank you. For what? For being brave. That night, Ethan called Arya. I'm in, he said when she picked up. In. The job. I'll take it. He could hear her exhale. Thank you. But we need to talk about the other thing. The personal thing. Yeah. Arya was quiet for a moment. I'm not expecting anything, Ethan. I just needed you to know how I felt. I feel it too, he admitted. I'm just not sure I'm ready. Then we'll take it slow. No pressure. Just see where it goes. Okay? Okay. They talked for a while longer, about the job, about what the next few months would look like, about rebuilding Voss Tech into something stronger. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan felt like he was moving forward instead of just treading water. The following Monday, Arya made the announcement. Ethan Cole was Vostek's new chief security officer. The response was mixed. Some people were excited. Others were skeptical. A few were openly hostile, questioning whether someone who'd been out of the industry for 6 years was really qualified for the role. Ethan didn't care. He had work to do. He spent the next 2 weeks meeting with every department, reviewing every system, implementing changes that Rachel had been pushing for months but hadn't had the authority to execute. He hired new people, fired the ones who weren't pulling their weight, rebuilt security protocols from the ground up. And slowly, Vostek started to feel like a company that could survive anything. Mia was adjusting too. She joined the photography club at school, was talking about applying to art programs for college, was becoming the person she was always meant to be. And Ethan was learning to let her. One Friday night, 3 months after he'd accepted Arya's offer, they had dinner together. Just the three of them, Ethan, Mia, and Arya. It was Arya's idea, a casual dinner, nothing formal, just Thai food and conversation. Mia grilled Arya about running a company, about what it was like to be in charge of thousands of people, about how she dealt with failure. Arya answered honestly, talked about the mistakes she'd made, the things she'd learned, the ways she was trying to be better, and Ethan watched them and realized something. This felt right. Not perfect, not easy, but right. After dinner, Mia excused herself to do homework, leaving Ethan and Arya alone in the living room. "She's incredible," Arya said. "She is." "She gets that from you," Ethan smiled. "She'd argue otherwise." Arya moved closer on the couch. Not too close, just closer. "Thank you," she said, "for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance." "Thank you for asking." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Arya reached over and took his hand. Ethan didn't pull away, and for the first time since Sarah died, he let himself imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss. A future that was defined by possibility. 6 months turned into 8. Then 10. Then a year. The apartment in Tribeca stopped feeling temporary. Mia's room filled up with posters and books and the accumulated debris of a teenager who'd finally found her place. The kitchen gathered coffee mugs from different cafes they'd discovered on weekends. The living room couch developed a permanent indent where Ethan sat every morning, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up. Home wasn't a house in Vermont anymore. It was here. Vostek was thriving in ways that surprised even Arya. The restructuring had been brutal but necessary. Dr. Chen had rebuilt the engineering department with fresh talent and new ideas. Rachel had turned the security infrastructure into something that other companies actually studied and envied. And Ethan had proven that being away from the industry for 6 years didn't mean you'd forgotten how to think. The board had stopped questioning Arya's decisions. Investors had stopped pulling out. Clients had started coming back, bringing contracts that were bigger than before. David Huang's betrayal had almost destroyed the company. Instead, it had forced everyone to build something stronger. The FBI had officially closed their investigation after 14 months. David was gone, and he wasn't coming back. Kevin Park had disappeared too. Not running, just rebuilding his life somewhere quieter. Ethan had heard through Rachel that he was working at a small nonprofit in Oregon, teaching kids to code. Sometimes Ethan thought about David's final email, about the warning buried in the bitterness, about how easy it was to confuse ambition with purpose, growth with success. Arya thought about it too. He could tell by the way she'd changed. She still worked long hours, still pushed herself hard, but she also took weekends off now. Let herself admit when she was wrong, listened when people pushed back. She was learning. They both were. The thing between them had developed slowly, carefully. Like two people who'd both been burned learning how to trust heat again. It started with coffee meetings that turned into dinners. Dinners that turned into walks through the city after dark. Walks that turned into moments where they'd stand too close and neither of them would step away. Mia noticed, of course. She didn't say anything at first, just watched with that knowing look teenagers have when they've figured out something adults think they're hiding. Finally, one night about 8 months in, she cornered Ethan in the kitchen. "So are you guys dating or what?" Ethan had been pulling leftovers out of the fridge. He nearly dropped the container. "What? You and Arya, you're together, right?" "It's complicated." Mia rolled her eyes. "It's really not. You like her. She likes you. You spend all your time together. That's called dating, Dad. We're taking it slow. You've been taking it slow for 8 months. At this rate, I'll be graduated before you guys actually call it a relationship. Ethan set down the leftovers. Does it bother you? The idea of me being with someone who's not your mom? Mia's expression softened. No, it doesn't. Mom's gone, Dad, and she'd want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. I am happy. Then stop overthinking it. She grabbed a fork and stole a bite of his food. Just be with her, officially, like a normal person. 2 days later, Ethan took Arya to dinner at a small Italian place in the West Village that didn't care if you were a CEO or a nobody. They'd been there before. It was becoming their place. Halfway through the meal, Arya set down her wine glass and looked at him. We should talk about what this is. Ethan had been expecting this conversation, dreading it, maybe. Okay.
Well, we've been doing this dance for months. The dinners, the late nights, the carefully maintained professional distance that everyone sees through anyway. She paused. I need to know what you want. What do you want? He asked. I asked first. Ethan took a breath. I want this. You, us, whatever this is, but I'm terrified of screwing it up. Why? Because I haven't done this since Sarah. Because I don't know if I remember how.
Because what if I'm not ready and I hurt you in the process? Arya reached across the table and took his hand. Then you hurt me, and we deal with it. But we don't get anywhere by playing it safe. You sound like my daughter. Your daughter's smart. Ethan looked at their hands, hers pale and elegant, his scarred from years of working with electronics. They fit together in a way that felt both strange and inevitable. All right, he said, let's do this. For real. Arya smiled. Not the professional one she wore in meetings. The real one. Yeah? Yeah. She squeezed his hand. Good. Because I was running out of patience. They finished dinner and walked back through the city, hand in hand, like two people who'd finally stopped pretending they didn't want this. When Ethan got home, Mia was waiting up. Well? She demanded. Well, what? Don't play dumb. Did you guys make it official? Ethan couldn't help but smile. We did. Mia whooped and hugged him. Finally! I thought I was going to have to lock you in a room together. That would have been weird. Desperate times. She pulled back, grinning. I'm happy for you, Dad. Really? Thanks, kid. Just don't get all gross and coupley. I have limits. No promises. The next few months were the happiest Ethan could remember in years. Work was challenging, but manageable. Mia was thriving at school. Her photography portfolio was good enough that her teacher had started talking about art school scholarships. And Arya was Arya, brilliant and difficult and funny in ways that surprised him. She'd show up at the apartment on Saturday mornings with bagels and terrible puns. She'd argue with him about security protocols until they were both laughing at how ridiculous they sounded. She'd sit with Mia and look at her photographs and give honest feedback that Mia actually listened to. She fit into their lives like she'd always been there. But there were hard days too. Days when Arya would get distant, buried under the weight of running a billion-dollar company. Days when Ethan would wake up and miss Sarah so intensely it felt like drowning. Days when Mia would snap at both of them for no reason, just teenage frustration at a world that demanded too much. They fought sometimes, real fights, about work boundaries and personal space and whether Ethan was being overprotective of Mia. But they also learned how to fight fair, how to apologize, how to come back to each other even when it would have been easier to walk away. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. 1 year and 3 months after Ethan had accepted Arya's job offer, Vostech launched a new product, an encryption protocol that was so secure even government agencies were interested. The launch party was huge. Investors, clients, press, the kind of event where everyone wore clothes that cost more than Ethan's first car and pretended they weren't constantly checking their phones. Ethan hated these things, but Arya had asked him to be there, so he showed up in a suit that Mia had helped him pick out and tried not to look as uncomfortable as he felt. Mia had come too, dressed up and excited. Sophie was with her, both of them taking photos and whispering about the celebrities they'd spotted. Arya was in her element, working the room, shaking hands, giving interviews. She looked powerful and confident and absolutely in control.
But when she caught Ethan's eye across the room, she smiled. Just for him. Halfway through the night, she found him on the balcony, escaping the noise. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just needed air." She leaned against the railing next to him. "Thank you for being here." "Of course." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city spread out below them. "I couldn't have done this without you," Arya said quietly. "Any of this. The company. The recovery. Figuring out who I want to be. You would have been fine. Maybe. But I wouldn't have been happy." She turned to face him. "You gave me that." Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd shown up in a blizzard and upended his entire life. "You gave it to me too." Arya kissed him, right there on the balcony, with the city lights behind them and the party continuing inside. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "Come on, let's get back in there before people start talking." "They're already talking." "Then let's give them something worth talking about." They went back inside, hand in hand. 2 weeks later, the FBI called. They'd found David. Not arrested him. Found him. He was dead. Overdose. Intentional or accidental, they couldn't say for sure. He'd been living in a small town in Mexico under a fake name, working as an English teacher. The news hit Arya harder than Ethan expected. She took the call in her office, then didn't come out for 3 hours. When Ethan finally went in, she was sitting at her desk, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were red. "He's dead." "I know. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, relief? Vindication?" She shook her head. "Instead, I just feel sad." Ethan sat down across from her. "He was your friend. You're allowed to mourn him. He betrayed me. And you're still allowed to be sad." Arya was quiet for a long time. The FBI said he left a note. Not a suicide note, just thoughts. "They're sending me a copy. Do you want to read it?" "I don't know." The note arrived 2 days later. Arya didn't read it right away. She let it sit on her desk for a week, like it might explode if she opened it. Finally, one night, she called Ethan and asked him to come over. He found her in her apartment, a place he'd been to a dozen times now, but still felt too big, too expensive, too much like a museum. She was sitting on the couch, the unopened envelope in her hands. "Will you read it with me?" she asked. "Of course." She opened the envelope. The note was handwritten. 3 pages. David's neat, precise script. "Arya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Not running this time, just gone. I won't apologize again. I've done that already, and words are cheap. But I need you to know some things. I never wanted to destroy what we built. I wanted to save it. I see now that my methods were wrong, that I was wrong. But the fear was real. The company was growing too fast. You were burning out. I could see it, even if you couldn't. I thought if I slowed you down, if I forced you to pause, you'd see it too. Instead, I destroyed everything I was trying to protect. I've spent the last year living under a different name in a place where no one knows who I am. I've taught English to kids who can barely afford notebooks. I've lived simply, quietly, and I've realized something. All that ambition we had, it was real. But it was also hollow. We were building an empire, but we forgot to build lives. You're better than I am. You always were. You'll figure that out. You'll build something that matters, not just something that's big. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope you find peace. Take care of yourself, Arya, and take care of the company. Make it something worth having. D. Arya set down the letter, tears streaming down her face. Ethan put his arm around her and let her cry. "He was right," she said finally. "About me burning out. About building something big instead of something meaningful." "You've changed that," Ethan said. "You're not the same person you were a year ago." "Because you made me change." "No, I just gave you permission to want something different." Arya wiped her eyes. "I wish I could tell him that I heard him, that I'm trying to be better." "I think he knew. That's why he wrote this." They sat together for a long time, processing grief that was complicated and messy and didn't have easy answers. Mia's 16th birthday fell on a Saturday in May. She'd been dropping hints for weeks about what she wanted. Not things, but experiences. A trip to the photography museum. Dinner at the sushi place she'd been obsessing over. Maybe a new camera lens if they were feeling generous.
Ethan and Arya had planned something bigger. They rented a small gallery space in Chelsea and invited Mia's friends, her teachers, people from Vostek who'd gotten to know her over the past year. And they hung her photographs. 30 of them. Her best work from the past year. Cityscapes and portraits and abstract shots that were better than anything Ethan could have imagined when they'd first moved here. When Mia walked in and saw them, she burst into tears. "You guys did this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You did this," Arya said. "We just gave you the space to show it." Mia hugged them both. "This is the best present ever." The party was perfect. Her friends loved the photos. Her teachers pulled Ethan aside and told him that Mia had real talent, that she should seriously consider art school. And for the first time, Ethan could see it. The future. Not just the next few months, but years ahead. Mia in college, studying photography or art or whatever passion grabbed her next. Himself and Arya, building something together. Not just a company, but a life. It wasn't the future he'd planned, but it was better. Later that night, after everyone had left and Mia had gone to bed, Ethan and Arya stood in the empty gallery, looking at the photographs. "She's incredible," Arya said. "She really is. You did that. You raised her to be brave and creative and fearless." Ethan shook his head. "I almost held her back. If you hadn't shown up that night, we'd still be in Vermont. She'd still be stuck. But you chose to come. That's what matters." Ethan looked at the photograph in front of him. It was a shot of the city at dawn, light breaking through the buildings, everything washed in gold. "I was terrified," he admitted, "when you showed up, when you asked me to come here. I thought I'd fail, thought I'd let everyone down." And I almost did. A dozen times, but I kept going anyway. Arya took his hand. "That's the thing about second chances. They don't come easy. You have to fight for them." "Was it worth it? All the fighting?" She looked at him. "What do you think?" Ethan thought about the past year and a half, the challenges, the failures, the moments when he'd wanted to quit and go back to something simpler, but he also thought about the victories, the growth, the way he'd learned to be someone he'd forgotten he could be. "Yeah," he said, "it was worth it." 3 months later, Ethan got a call from Mrs. Patterson, Mia's old guidance counselor in Vermont. She was retiring and cleaning out her office. She'd found some of Mia's old schoolwork and wanted to know if he wanted her to mail it. "Actually," Ethan said, "we'll be back there next week. I can pick it up." He hadn't planned on going back, but the house had been sitting empty for over a year, and he needed to make a decision about it. Sell it, or rent it, or do something other than let it gather dust. Mia was excited about the trip. She wanted to see Emily, show Sophie where she'd grown up, take photos of the town with fresh eyes. Arya asked if she could come too. Ethan said yes. The drive up was easier this time. Less anxiety. More nostalgia. When they pulled up to the house, it looked smaller than Ethan remembered. The paint was fading. The lawn needed mowing. The whole place had the sad, neglected look of something that had been left behind. They walked through it together, Ethan, Mia, and Arya. Mia pointed out her old room, the kitchen where she'd learned to make pancakes, the spot in the living room where the Christmas tree used to go. Arya was quiet, just listening, taking it all in. Finally, they ended up in the backyard. Ethan stood there, looking at the swing set he'd built when Mia was 6. The garden Sarah had planted that had long since gone to weeds. "This was a good place," he said. "For a while." Mia nodded. "But it's not home anymore." "No, it's not." Arya put her hand on his shoulder. "What do you want to do with it?" Ethan thought about it, about holding on versus letting go, about what it meant to move forward without erasing the past. "I want to sell it," he said. "Give it to someone who needs it, someone who'll fill it with new memories." Mia smiled. "Good." They left the next day after Mia said goodbye to Emily and Sophie had taken 100 photos and Ethan had picked up the box of schoolwork from Mrs. Patterson. On the drive back to New York, Mia fell asleep in the back seat. Arya looked over at Ethan. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm good." "No regrets?" "About leaving?" "No." "About taking this long to figure out what I wanted?" "Maybe." Arya smiled. "Better late than never." "Is it, though? I wasted 6 years being scared." "You didn't waste them. You were a father. You took care of your daughter. That matters. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror at Mia, sleeping peacefully.
I just wish I'd been braver sooner. Brave isn't the absence of fear, Ethan. It's doing the thing anyway. You did that. You're still doing it. He reached over and took her hand. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the city rising up to meet them as the sun set behind them. The house in Vermont sold 3 weeks later. Ethan used the money to set up a college fund for Mia that would cover anything the scholarship didn't. The rest he invested, saved, prepared for a future that felt real now instead of theoretical. Vostek continued to grow, but in ways that felt sustainable. Arya had learned to delegate, to trust people, to admit when she needed help. Rachel got promoted to VP of Security. Dr. Chen became a partner. The company wasn't just Arya anymore. It was a team. Ethan settled into his role as CSO with a confidence he hadn't expected. He still had moments of doubt, still occasionally felt like an imposter, but he'd learned that everyone did. The difference was whether you let the doubt paralyze you or just acknowledged it and kept moving. Mia applied to art schools. NYU, Parsons, Rhode Island School of Design. Her portfolio was stunning. Her grades were solid. Her recommendations glowed. She got into all of them. When the acceptances came, she and Ethan sat at the kitchen table looking at the letters. "Which one do you want?" he asked. "I think NYU, so I can stay close." Ethan's chest tightened. "You don't have to stay for me." "I'm not. I'm staying because this is home, because my friends are here, because New York is where I want to be." "You're sure?" "Dad, you spent 6 years putting your life on hold for me. I'm not about to make you do it again. We're both here because we want to be, right?" "Right." She grinned. "Good. Now, help me write a really good acceptance letter that doesn't sound like I'm trying too hard." One Saturday morning, about 2 years after that blizzard night when Arya had shown up at his door, Ethan woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. Arya was in the kitchen making breakfast. She'd stayed over the night before. She stayed over a lot now. Mia was already up, editing photos on her laptop at the counter. It was normal, domestic, easy. Ethan poured himself coffee and sat down next to Mia. "What are you working on?" "Final project for my portfolio class. It's supposed to be about transformation." "What are you showing?" She turned the laptop toward him. It was a series of photos. The house in Vermont, empty and fading. The New York apartment, filled with life. Shots of Ethan at Vostek, focused and engaged. Pictures of Arya, laughing. Candids of the three of them together. "It's about us," Mia said. "About how we changed." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Mia, it's incredible." "You think?" "I know." Arya came over and looked at the photos. "These are beautiful, Mia." "Thanks. I'm calling it second chances." Ethan looked at his daughter, at Arya, at the life they'd built together. "That's perfect," he said, "because that's what this was. All of it. A second chance. Not the kind that came easy, not the kind that fixed everything or erased the pain of what had been lost, but the kind that demanded courage. That asked you to risk failure for the possibility of something better. That forced you to choose growth over comfort, even when comfort felt safer." Ethan had spent 6 years choosing safety, and it had cost him more than he'd realized. But when Arya had shown up in that blizzard, she'd offered him something he'd forgotten how to want. A future that wasn't about surviving, a life that was about living. He'd almost said no, almost let fear win. But Mia had pushed him. Arya had challenged him. And somewhere along the way, he'd found the courage to push back. The past 2 years hadn't been perfect. There had been failures and setbacks and moments when everything felt like too much. But there had also been victories, growth, joy. The kind of happiness that only came from choosing the hard thing instead of the easy one. Ethan looked at the photo on Mia's laptop. The three of them, captured in a moment of laughter he barely remembered happening. They looked like a family, not perfect, not without scars, but real, alive, together. "Hey," Arya said, nudging him. "You okay?" Ethan smiled. "Yeah, I'm good. You're doing that thing where you get all introspective and emotional." "Can't help it. I'm proud of her." Mia looked up, grinning. "Gross, stop being sappy." No promises. Later that day, the three of them walked through Central Park.
It was one of those perfect New York days where the weather was just right and the city felt alive in the best way. Mia ran ahead with her camera, taking photos of everything. Arya and Ethan walked together, hand in hand. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Arya asked. "All the time." And? "And I'm glad they're not." Arya smiled. "Me too." They found a bench and sat, watching Mia photograph strangers and trees and the light filtering through the leaves.
"I love you," Arya said quietly. It was the first time she'd said it. Ethan turned to look at her. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He kissed her. "I love you too." It felt right. Saying it, meaning it, letting himself have this. Mia came running back, out of breath, her camera full of new images. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Ready," Ethan said. They walked out of the park together, into the noise and chaos of the city they'd all chosen. And Ethan realized something. Second chances didn't arrive gently. They came like storms, like blizzards in the middle of the night, like unexpected phone calls and impossible choices. They demanded everything, asked you to leave behind the life you knew for one you couldn't predict. But if you were brave enough to say yes, if you were willing to risk the comfort of what you had for the possibility of what you could have, they gave you something precious. Not perfection, not certainty, but a chance to become who you were always meant to be. Ethan had been given that chance, and he'd taken it. Not because he was fearless, but because he'd learned that fear wasn't a reason to stay still. It was just a feeling, and feelings could be faced. The city rose around them, vast and unforgiving and full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid of what came next. He was ready for it.